My name is Samuel Hart. I'm 72 years old, and yesterday, my own son-in-law raised his hand at me. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there shaking, and today, I handed him a small package he thought contained money. He even laughed and said, "Finally, you're learning." But when he opened it, he nearly collapsed. Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. You know, I was just arranging old photographs that afternoon. Just photos. Simple things. Pictures of my late wife, pictures of my daughter when she was 5 years old with her missing front teeth, pictures of birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays that somehow meant everything. I had them spread across the dining table, trying to organize them into albums I'd been meaning to finish for 3 years. The sun was coming through the kitchen window at that perfect angle, the one that makes dust particles look like they're dancing. Everything was peaceful, everything was quiet, and then the doorbell rang. Wasn't expecting anyone. My daughter usually calls before she visits, but when I opened the door, there she stood, and beside her was him, Trevor, my son-in-law, the man I'd welcomed into my family 4 years ago with open arms and a full heart, the man who'd promised to take care of my little girl. But the moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. He didn't even say hello. He just brushed past me into my own house like he owned the place. My daughter, Natalie, she gave me this weak smile, this apologetic little gesture, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when my chest tightened. That's when I felt that cold finger of dread trace down my spine. "We need to talk," Trevor said. Not asked, said, like I didn't have a choice. I closed the door slowly, my hands already starting to shake, and I followed them into my living room. The room where I'd rocked Natalie to sleep when she was a baby. The room where we'd watched cartoons on Saturday mornings. The room where my wife and I had slow danced on our anniversary, just the two of us, no music, just her humming. And now Trevor was standing in the middle of it, his jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. "I need $15,000, he said. Just like that. No preamble. No explanation. $15,000, I blinked at him. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me, old man, 15,000 today." The way he said "old man" made my blood run cold. There was such contempt in his voice, such absolute disdain. I looked at Natalie, but she was staring at the floor, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. "Trevor, I don't have that kind of money just lying around," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, trying to be reasonable. "What's this about? What do you need it for?" "That's none of your damn business," he exploded, and I actually flinched. "I need it, and you're going to give it to me. You have this house, you have your pension, you have savings. Don't stand there and tell me you can't help your own daughter." "My daughter," I looked at Natalie again. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" She opened her mouth, but Trevor cut her off. "Don't talk to her, talk to me. I'm the man of the family now. Your wife is dead, and you're just a lonely old man living in the past. So stop pretending you have any authority here and get me the money." The words hit me like physical blows, each one. Your wife is dead. Lonely old man. Living in the past. I felt my throat close up, felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, not in front of him. "Trevor, I'm not giving you $15,000, I said quietly. "Not without knowing what it's for. Not without understanding why you're speaking to me this way in my own home." And that's when everything changed. His face went red, his eyes went wild. And before I could even process what was happening, he took 3 quick steps toward me and raised his hand. Time seemed to slow down. I saw his palm coming toward my face, saw the rage contorting his features, saw my daughter's mouth open in a silent scream. The slap connected with the side of my head. It wasn't a punch, but it didn't need to be. I'm 72 years old. I have arthritis in my knees, and I take blood thinners for my heart. The force of it sent me stumbling sideways into the bookshelf. My shoulder hit the corner, and pain exploded through my arm. I heard something fall and shatter, one of my wife's porcelain figurines crashing to the floor. Dad, Natalie finally found her voice, but it was weak, so weak. I steadied myself against the bookshelf, my hand going to my face. My cheek was on fire, my ear was ringing, I could taste blood in my mouth from where I'd bitten my tongue. Trevor stood there breathing hard, his hand still raised, and for a moment I thought he was going to hit me again. But then he lowered his arm and pointed at me instead. "You have until tomorrow," he said, his voice deadly calm now. "Tomorrow afternoon. 15,000 cash, or I promise you, old man, you'll regret it. And Natalie stays with me. If you want to see your daughter again, you'll do exactly what I say." He grabbed Natalie's arm, yanked her toward the door. She looked back at me over her shoulder, her eyes full of tears, her face pale and terrified. But she didn't pull away from him. She didn't run to me. She just let him drag her out of my house. The door slammed, and I was alone. I stood there for I don't know how long, just breathing, just trying to process what had just happened. My face throbbed, my shoulder ached, but worse than any physical pain was the hollowness spreading through my chest. My son-in-law had just assaulted me in my own home, and my daughter had watched it happen. Finally, I moved. I walked slowly to the bathroom, each step sending jolts of pain through my shoulder. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. My left cheek was already starting to bruise, a dark red mark spreading across the weathered skin. There was a small cut near my ear where his ring must have caught me. My eyes looked ancient. Defeated, I took out my phone with shaking hands. I almost called Natalie, almost, but something stopped me. Some instinct that told me this was bigger than just one incident. This was a pattern I'd been refusing to see. Instead, I took photos, close-ups of my face from multiple angles, wide shots showing the bruising, photos of my shoulder where it had hit the bookshelf, already turning purple. I documented everything with the methodical precision of a man who'd finally woken up to a terrible reality. Then I remembered. The doorbell camera. I'd installed it 6 months ago after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. I pulled up the app on my phone, my hands still trembling, and scrolled back to this afternoon's footage. There it was, crystal clear. Trevor and Natalie arriving, the three of us entering the house. And then, 23 minutes later, Trevor dragging Natalie out, his face twisted with rage, Natalie crying. The audio was muffled, but you could hear raised voices. You could hear the crash of something breaking. I saved the footage, downloaded it to 3 different places. And then I sat down on my bathroom floor and finally let myself cry. I cried for my daughter who'd married a monster. I cried for my wife who wasn't here to help me fix this. I cried for myself, for being too old and too weak to protect the people I loved. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was just an empty shell sitting on cold tile in a house that suddenly felt enormous and terribly, terribly quiet. When I finally pulled myself together, it was dark outside. I'd lost hours just sitting there. My body was stiff, my face hurt worse, and my mind was racing with questions I didn't want to answer. How long had this been going on? How long had Trevor been treating Natalie this way? And why hadn't I seen it? But the truth was, I had seen it. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. I made myself get up, made myself walk to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and forced myself to think, to really think. And that's when I called Gerald. Gerald Pemberton, my attorney for the past 20 years. The man who'd handled my wife's estate, who'd helped me with property disputes, who'd become something closer to a friend than just a lawyer. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Samuel, it's late. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, and my voice cracked on that single word. "No, Gerald, everything is not okay." I told him everything, every detail, every word Trevor had said, every moment of the assault, everything. And Gerald listened without interrupting, which I appreciated more than I could say. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Samuel," he finally said, his voice grave, "you need to listen to me very carefully. This is serious. This is assault. Possibly worse, depending on how we frame it. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think so. No, I need you to understand completely. Your son-in-law committed a crime today, in your home, and you have evidence. That changes everything. I don't want to destroy Natalie's marriage, I said weakly. Samuel, he destroyed it himself the moment he raised his hand to you. Your job now is to protect yourself and your daughter. Are you hearing me? I closed my eyes. Yes. Good, here's what you're going to do. First, you're going to forward me all that footage and those photos right now, tonight. Then you're going to write down everything that happened while it's still fresh in your mind. Every word you can remember, every detail, time stamps if you can. And Samuel. Yes. You don't contact him. You don't contact Natalie if he's with her. You don't respond to texts or calls from Trevor under any circumstances. Everything goes through me now. Do you understand? I understand. I'll have something prepared by tomorrow morning. We're going to handle this the right way, the legal way. You're not alone in this, Samuel. I promise you that. After we hung up, I did exactly what he said. I forwarded everything to his secure email. Then I sat down with a legal pad and I wrote. I wrote for 3 hours straight, filling page after page with everything I could remember, not just from today, but from the past 4 years. Because once I started looking, really looking, the signs had been there all along. I remembered the engagement party, how Trevor had made jokes about Natalie's weight in front of everyone, how he'd laughed when she blushed and looked away, how I'd thought he was just being playful, just teasing, but now I heard the cruelty in it. I remembered their wedding day, how he'd gotten angry because the photographer wanted to take more pictures with my family. How he'd said, haven't they had enough? This is our day, not a reunion for the nursing home crowd. And everyone had laughed nervously, and I'd swallowed my hurt and told myself he was just stressed. I remembered the first time they'd asked to borrow money, $500 for car repairs. I'd given it gladly. Then another $1,000 for medical bills. Then $2,000 for a business investment. Then another $3,000 for a down payment on a new apartment because their landlord was discriminating against them. I'd given and given and given, and not once had they paid back a single cent. I remembered the Thanksgiving dinner when Trevor had snapped at Natalie for burning the rolls, called her useless in front of the whole family, and she'd locked herself in the bathroom crying for an hour. I remembered the Christmas when he'd opened my gift, a nice watch I'd spent weeks picking out, and said, "What am I supposed to do with this old man junk?" and tossed it aside. I remembered birthday phone calls where Natalie sounded tired, so tired, and always had an excuse for why they couldn't visit. I remembered the last time I'd seen her before today, maybe 3 weeks ago, and she'd been wearing a long-sleeved shirt in the middle of summer. When I'd asked if she was okay, she'd smiled too brightly and changed the subject. God, how had I been so blind? By the time I finished writing, it was past midnight. My hand was cramping, my head was pounding, and my heart felt like it was breaking all over again. But I had 13 pages of detailed notes. 13 pages of documented abuse that I'd witnessed and ignored because I wanted to believe my daughter was happy. I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, thinking about my wife. Linda, she would have known what to do. She always knew what to do. When Natalie was 16 and got caught sneaking out, Linda handled it with such grace and wisdom. When Natalie graduated college and couldn't decide between job offers, Linda helped her think it through. When Natalie brought Trevor home for the first time, Linda had pulled me aside later and said, "Keep an eye on that one, Samuel. Something's not quite right." But I dismissed her concerns, told her she was being overprotective, told her to give the boy a chance. I should have listened to my wife. The next morning came too soon. I woke up stiff and sore, my face a spectacular landscape of bruises. I looked like I'd been in a car accident. I took more photos in the morning light, documenting how the bruising had spread and darkened overnight. Gerald called at 8 a.m. sharp. "I've reviewed everything you sent," he said without preamble. "Samuel, this is worse than I thought, but we have a strong case, very strong. I've already drafted a restraining order petition, and I'm filing it this morning. I've also contacted a detective I know in the police department. They'll want to interview you today." Today. The sooner we act, the better. Time is crucial in these cases. Will you be able to come to my office at 10? Yes, of course. Good, and Samuel, has he contacted you since yesterday? I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from Trevor, 7 texts. I hadn't opened any of them. He's called and texted, but I haven't responded. Perfect, don't. Let me read the texts though. Can you forward them? I opened the messages and my stomach turned. The first one, sent at 11 p.m. "You better have my money ready, old man. At midnight, don't think you can ignore me. I know where you live, obviously. At 2 a.m., Natalie is upset because of you, because you won't help your own daughter. What kind of father are you? At 6 a.m., I'll be there at 3 p.m. today. Have the cash ready or things will get worse, much worse." There were more, each one escalating in threat and desperation. I forwarded them all to Gerald with shaking hands. "Jesus," Gerald breathed after a moment. "Samuel, these are textbook intimidation and harassment. He's building our case for us. Stay put this morning. Don't go anywhere. I'm sending someone to your house right now to install additional security cameras. Then come to my office at 10. We're going to handle this properly." He hung up, and I sat there in my kitchen, my coffee going cold in front of me, wondering how my life had turned into a crime drama. The security company arrived at 9. They installed cameras covering every entrance to my house, upgraded my doorbell camera, and gave me a panic button that would alert both them and the police. The installer was a kind young woman who kept glancing at my bruised face but didn't say anything. I appreciated that. At 9:45, I drove to Gerald's office. It felt surreal, driving through normal morning traffic with my face looking like this, going about official business when my whole world had imploded. People stared at me at red lights. A woman in the parking garage actually gasped. Gerald's office was on the 3rd floor of a modest building downtown. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, but never for anything like this. His secretary, Patricia, looked up when I walked in, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Samuel." "It looks worse than it is," I lied. Gerald came out immediately, took one look at me, and his jaw tightened. "Come in. Detective Rodriguez is already here." The detective was a woman in her mid-40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She shook my hand gently, mindful of my injuries, and gestured for me to sit. "Mr. Hart, I need to photograph your injuries first, if that's okay. I know Gerald already has photos, but we need official documentation for the police report." I nodded and sat still while she took pictures from every angle, her camera clicking softly. Then she sat across from me with a recorder and a notepad. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning, take your time." So I did, again, every detail. She didn't interrupt, just let me talk, occasionally making notes. When I got to the part about Trevor hitting me, my voice broke. When I mentioned Natalie's face as Trevor dragged her out, I had to stop and compose myself. Detective Rodriguez handed me a tissue box without comment. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me with something like sadness in her eyes. "Mr. Hart, I'm going to be straight with you. What happened to you is assault, clear and simple. The texts he sent are criminal harassment and intimidation. The fact that he made threats about your daughter is coercive control. We have enough here to arrest him today if you want to press charges." "Will that help Natalie?" I asked. She hesitated. In domestic violence situations involving coercive control, sometimes the victim has been so manipulated they defend the abuser. Your daughter may not thank you for this initially. But in the long run, yes, this helps her. This shows her there are consequences. This shows her that what's happening isn't normal or acceptable. Then do it, I said. Press charges, file the restraining order, all of it. Gerald leaned forward. Samuel, once we do this, there's no going back. Trevor will be arrested. This will be public record. Natalie will know you're the one who initiated this. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my daughter's pale, terrified face. I thought about the bruise spreading across my own cheek. I thought about those texts, each one more threatening than the last. I'm prepared, I said. And I meant it. Detective Rodriguez nodded. Okay, I'm going to file this report immediately. We'll issue a warrant for his arrest today. The restraining order will be processed within hours. Gerald will get you copies of everything. In the meantime, you go home, you lock your doors, and you don't open them for anyone except police. Understand? I understand. Good, Mr. Hart. You did the right thing coming forward. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did. I wanted to believe her. I left Gerald's office at noon with copies of restraining order paperwork, a police report number, and a heavy weight in my chest. Gerald walked me to my car. The security company called, he said. Your cameras are all active. I can monitor them from my phone if you give me access, just in case. Thank you, Gerald, for everything. He gripped my shoulder, the good one. You're not alone in this, old friend. Remember that. I drove home in a daze. The text from Trevor came at 1:47 p.m. 2 hours, old man, don't forget. I didn't respond. At 2:30, Gerald called. The warrant is out. They're looking for him now. Stay inside. At 2:55, my doorbell camera alerted me to motion. My heart seized, but it wasn't Trevor. It was my neighbor, Pauline Chen, standing on my porch with what looked like concern on her face. I opened the door. Samuel, she said immediately, her eyes scanning my face. I heard shouting yesterday. Saw that awful man drag your daughter out. I should have come over immediately. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? And just like that, I had a witness. Pauline, I said, could you come in for a moment? I need to ask you something. She did, and she told me she'd heard everything through our shared wall. The yelling, the crash, Trevor's threats. She'd even taken note of the time because she'd been so disturbed she almost called the police herself. Why didn't you? I asked. She looked ashamed. I didn't want to interfere in family business, but I've been feeling terrible about it ever since. Samuel, if you need me to tell anyone what I heard, I will. I absolutely will. I got her contact information. Forwarded it to Gerald and Detective Rodriguez immediately. Another piece of evidence, another witness. At 3:15 p.m., Trevor's car pulled up in front of my house. I watched through the camera feed as he got out, smoothed his shirt, and walked up to my door with an arrogant swagger that made my blood boil. He rang the doorbell, knocked, rang it again. Come on, old man, I know you're in there, open up. I didn't move, he knocked harder. Samuel, stop being childish. I'm here for what you owe me. What I owed him, the audacity of it was staggering. He tried the doorknob, locked. He kicked the door once, twice. Then he pulled out his phone and called me. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. You're making a big mistake, Samuel, a huge mistake. When I finally get in there, you're going to regret this. And trust me, I will get in, one way or another. He stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, alternating between threatening texts and attempts to peer through my windows. At one point, he walked around to the back of the house. The security cameras caught him trying the back door, testing the windows. I called Detective Rodriguez. He's here, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. At my house right now, trying to break in. We have units in your area. Stay on the line with me. Do not engage with him. Through the phone, I heard her radioing for backup, giving my address, confirming my safety. Samuel, officers are 3 minutes out. Stay away from the doors and windows. I did. I sat in my living room, phone pressed to my ear, watching the security feed on my tablet as Trevor circled my house like a predator. He was getting angrier by the minute, his movements more erratic. Then I heard the sirens. Through the camera, I watched Trevor's head snap up, watched him look toward the street, watched the exact moment he realized what was happening. 2 police cruisers pulled up, 4 officers emerged. "Trevor Larson," one of them called. Trevor's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "What's this about?" he blustered. "I'm just here to see my father-in-law." "We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Larson. Please put your hands behind your back." "What? This is ridiculous. For what?" "Assault, harassment, intimidation, and attempted breaking and entering. Hands behind your back. Now." I watched through the camera as my son-in-law, the man who'd raised his hand to me just 24 hours ago, was handcuffed and led to a police car. He was shouting, struggling, making a scene. The officers remained professional and calm. One of them approached my door and knocked gently. "Mr. Hart, it's safe to come out now." I opened the door on shaking legs. "Are you all right, sir?" the officer asked. "I am now," I said. They took my statement again, right there on my porch, took more photos of my face, documented the text messages and the camera footage of Trevor trying to break in. One officer, a young man with kind eyes, told me I was brave for coming forward. I didn't feel brave, I felt exhausted. Trevor was taken to the county jail. The restraining order was officially served. I was given copies of everything and instructions on what to do if he violated it. And then, finally, they left, and I was alone again. I sat down on my couch and just breathed. It was done. The first step was done. Trevor was in custody. I was safe. But Natalie... God, Natalie, she didn't know yet. Unless Trevor had called her, which he probably had, she would be so confused, so scared, so angry. My phone rang at 4:47 p.m. "Natalie." I answered with my heart in my throat. "Dad," her voice was wrecked, sobbing. "Dad, what did you do? What did you do?" "Sweetheart." "They arrested Trevor. They came to his work and arrested him in front of everyone. They're saying he assaulted you, that he threatened you, that he tried to break into your house. Dad, why would you lie like this? Why would you do this to us?" Every word was a knife to my heart. "Natalie, honey, I didn't lie. Everything they said is true. He did assault me. He did threaten me. I have witnesses. I have footage. I have." "I don't believe you. Trevor would never hurt anyone. You're just bitter and lonely and you can't stand to see me happy." "Happy." The word came out sharp, harder than I intended. "Natalie, are you happy? Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, you look terrified every time you're around him." She went quiet. For a long moment, all I could hear was her breathing. "You don't understand," she finally whispered. "Then help me understand. Please, come over, let's talk, just you and me." "I can't, I have to go bail Trevor out. I have to," her voice broke. "I have to fix this." Natalie listened to me, but she'd already hung up. I tried to call her back. It went straight to voicemail. I sent her a text. "I love you. I'm doing this because I love you. Please just talk to me." No response. That night was one of the longest of my life. I kept checking my phone, hoping Natalie would call back. She didn't. I checked the security cameras obsessively, half expecting Trevor to somehow show up despite being in jail. He didn't. Gerald called at 9 p.m. "He posted bail," he said, "just so you know, but the restraining order is in effect. He can't come within 500 feet of you or your property. If he does, he goes right back to jail." "What about Natalie?" Gerald sighed. "The order doesn't prevent him from seeing her. I'm sorry, Samuel, but we're building a strong case. The court date is set for 2 weeks from now. In the meantime, you focus on healing. Document everything. If he tries to contact you in any way, you tell me immediately." "Okay," I said, but I felt hollow. The next few days were surreal. I went about my normal routine, but nothing felt normal. I saw Dr. Patterson for my injuries, got everything documented officially. He prescribed pain medication and told me I was lucky the slap hadn't caused more serious damage given my age and medical conditions. I didn't hear from Natalie. I saw her car drive by my house once slowly, but she didn't stop. That hurt worse than Trevor's slap ever could. Friends from church called, having heard somehow about an incident. I gave vague answers. Pauline came by with soup and quiet company. Gerald called daily with updates. And then, 4 days after Trevor's arrest, something unexpected happened. My phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Samuel Hart?" a woman's voice. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Linda Chen. I heard through a friend who works at the courthouse that you filed charges against Trevor Larson. Mr. Hart, I need to talk to you. Trevor did the same thing to me 3 years ago, almost exactly the same." My blood went cold. "What?" "I was dating him before he met your daughter. We were together for 2 years. He became violent. He manipulated me, took money from me, isolated me from my family. And one day he hit me hard, broke my collarbone. But when I tried to press charges, he had friends who intimidated me. I dropped the case. I was too afraid." "Oh my God," I breathed. "I've carried guilt about that every day since," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Because I knew he'd do it again. I knew he'd find someone else. And now he has your daughter. And you, Mr. Hart, if you're building a case against him, I want to help. I have medical records, photos, text messages. I saved everything. Please, let me help make sure he doesn't get away with it this time." I gave her Gerald's contact information with shaking hands. After we hung up, I immediately called Gerald and told him everything. "This changes the game entirely," Gerald said. "This establishes a pattern. This shows premeditation. Samuel, with her testimony, Trevor won't just face assault charges. We might be looking at a pattern of domestic violence charges. That carries serious prison time." Linda wasn't alone. Over the next week, 3 more people contacted me, 2 ex-girlfriends and a former co-worker, each one with a similar story: manipulation, threats, violence, financial exploitation. One woman showed me photos of bruises that made mine look mild. Another told me about the miscarriage she'd had after Trevor pushed her down a flight of stairs. It was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. Gerald compiled it all, built a case that was becoming ironclad. And then, a week after Trevor's arrest, a journalist reached out, Nathan Brooks, who wrote for the local paper and did investigative pieces. He'd gotten wind of the story through courthouse records and wanted to know more. I was hesitant at first, but Gerald thought it could help. "Public awareness can be powerful," he said, "especially in cases like this where the abuser has gotten away with it before. It puts pressure on the system to take this seriously." So I met with Nathan, told him everything, including about the other victims. He interviewed Linda and the others who were willing to go on record. He verified everything meticulously. The article ran a week before the court date. Front page of the local section: "Local man faces multiple charges in pattern of domestic violence and elder abuse." It detailed everything: Trevor's history of violence, the multiple victims, my case, the evidence. It was thorough and damning and completely factual. The community reaction was immediate. Trevor's employer, a local insurance company, suspended him pending investigation. His friends started distancing themselves publicly. People I barely knew stopped me at the grocery store to tell me they were praying for me. And Natalie finally called. "I read the article," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. "Sweetheart, is it true?" The other women, Linda Chen, the others, "is it all true?" "Yes," I said gently. "I'm so sorry, but yes, it's all documented. Medical records, police reports, everything." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "I feel so stupid," she finally whispered. "So unbelievably stupid." "You're not stupid, you're a victim. He manipulated you, he isolated you. None of this is your fault. He told me you were crazy, that you were making it all up because you were jealous. I believed him." She laughed, but it was bitter and broken. "I actually believed him over you, my own father. Natalie, you were being abused. It's not that simple. The way he controlled you, that's part of the abuse. Do you understand that?" "I don't know what I understand anymore," she said. "But Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not believing you, for letting him hurt you, for," her voice broke completely, "for everything." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said firmly. "Nothing, do you hear me? You are not responsible for his actions." "Can I see you?" she asked quietly. "Can I come over?" "Of course, always. Doors always open for you." She came that evening. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she'd lost weight. But she was still my daughter, still my baby girl. She saw my face, still bruised, and started crying. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Daddy." I pulled her into my arms, and she collapsed against me, crying like she used to when she was little, and the world felt too big and too scary. I held her and let her cry, stroking her hair, telling her it was okay, even though nothing was okay. We talked for hours that night. She told me things that broke my heart into even smaller pieces, how Trevor had started out charming and loving, how it had changed gradually, so gradually she didn't notice until she was trapped. The controlling behavior, the put-downs disguised as jokes, the isolation from friends and family, the financial manipulation. And yes, the violence, not often, but often enough, usually where no one would see the bruises. "He said if I ever left him, he'd ruin me," she told me, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said he'd tell everyone I was crazy, unstable, that I'd lose my job at the hospital, that no one would believe me. And I believed him, Dad. I was so scared." "You don't have to be scared anymore," I told her. "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and we're going to make sure he can never hurt you again." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Because 3 days later, Trevor filed a countersuit. Gerald called me at 7 in the morning, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "He's claiming you assaulted him," he said, "that you attacked him in your home and that he acted in self-defense. He's filing harassment charges and claiming emotional distress. He's also filed a defamation suit against you, the newspaper, and every person who gave testimony about his past." I felt the blood drain from my face. "He's what?" "It's a desperate move," Gerald said quickly. "A common tactic abusers use to intimidate victims and muddy the waters. But Samuel, it's going to get ugly. He's hired Bernard Castor." I knew that name. Everyone in our town knew that name. Bernard Castor was the attorney who got drunk drivers off, who defended white-collar criminals, who had a reputation for winning cases through intimidation and legal manipulation. "This just got a lot more complicated," Gerald said. He wasn't wrong. The next few days were a nightmare of legal maneuvering. Trevor's attorney filed motions to suppress evidence, to dismiss witnesses, to question the validity of my injuries. They claimed the doorbell footage was doctored. They claimed I'd paid Linda Chen and the other victims to lie. They even claimed that my bruises were self-inflicted or from a fall, not from Trevor's hand. It was vicious, it was calculated, and it was terrifying. Natalie received a cease and desist letter warning her not to speak to me or she'd be implicated in the conspiracy against Trevor. She called me crying, saying she didn't know what to do. "You do what you need to do to stay safe," I told her. "I understand," but my heart was breaking. The harassment from Trevor's supporters started soon after. People I didn't know sending me messages online calling me a liar, saying I was trying to ruin a good man's life. Someone spray-painted "liar" on my garage door. I received threatening phone calls in the middle of the night. I started to understand why Linda Chen and the others had dropped their cases. This wasn't just about facing your abuser in court. This was about being torn apart by a system that seemed designed to protect the abuser. I almost gave up. I won't lie about that. There was a night, about a week before the trial, when I sat in my dark living room and thought about withdrawing everything, just ending it, taking the loss, living with the shame and the pain and letting Trevor win. But then I thought about Natalie, about Linda, about all the other victims who'd been too scared to fight back, about the next person Trevor would hurt if I didn't stop him now. And I remembered something my wife used to say, sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing, but that's exactly why we have to do it. So I didn't give up. I held on. The discovery process revealed more than I expected. Gerald's team found financial records showing Trevor had embezzled money from 3 previous employers. Credit card statements showing he'd been taking cash advances on cards in Natalie's name without her knowledge. Text messages to other women, some of them married, some of them very young. A pattern of manipulation and exploitation that went back 15 years. This man is a predator, Gerald told me, laying out document after document on his conference table. Not just violent, a systematic predator. And we're going to make sure the court sees that. 2 days before the trial, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. Natalie showed up at my door at 10 o'clock at night. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back severely. She was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, a professional suit that made her look older, harder. "I'm testifying," she said before I could even say hello. "At the trial, I'm testifying against him." "Natalie, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. Her voice was steady now, stronger than I'd heard in years. "I talked to Linda and to the others, and Dad, I realized something. If I don't speak up now, I'm part of the problem. I'm enabling him to hurt someone else. I can't live with that. I won't." "Sweetheart, he's going to come after you. His lawyer is brutal. They're going to try to tear you apart on the stand." "Let them try," she said, and there was steel in her voice that reminded me so much of her mother it made my chest ache. "I'm done being scared. I'm done being his victim. It's time to be a survivor instead." I hugged her so tight I was afraid I might hurt her. My brave, beautiful daughter who'd found her strength in the darkest moment. "Your mother would be so proud of you," I whispered. "I hope so," she said, "because I'm terrified." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," I told her, pulling back to look at her face. "It means doing it anyway." The morning of the trial, I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't go back to sleep. I lay in bed watching the ceiling, my mind racing through every possible scenario. What if we lost? What if Trevor walked free? What if the judge didn't believe us? What if the jury saw me as just a bitter old man trying to ruin his son-in-law's life? I got up, showered, and dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral. It felt appropriate somehow. This was a kind of death too, the death of the illusion that my family was safe and whole. Gerald picked me up at 8. We drove to the courthouse in silence. He could sense I didn't want to talk, and I was grateful for that. The courthouse was an old stone building downtown, the kind with marble floors and high ceilings that made every sound echo. It felt simultaneously too big and too small, too important and not important enough for what was about to happen. People were already there. Linda Chen, looking nervous but determined, the other victims who'd agreed to testify, Nathan Brooks, the journalist, sitting in the back with his notepad, Pauline Chen, my neighbor, who'd come to support me, and Natalie, standing apart from everyone, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the courtroom doors like they might swallow her whole. I went to her. "You okay?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm here. That's all that matters." Trevor arrived at 8:45 with Bernard Castor and an entourage of supporters. He looked different than the last time I'd seen him, thinner, harder. His jaw was set in that arrogant way I remembered, but there was something desperate in his eyes. He saw Natalie and his whole face changed. He started toward her, but his lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him back. Trevor's eyes locked on mine instead, and the hatred in them was so pure, so intense, it actually made me take a step back. "All rise." Judge Andrea Morrison entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for running a tight courtroom. She took her seat, surveyed the room, and began. The prosecution went first. Gerald was meticulous, laying out the timeline of events with precision. He showed the doorbell footage of Trevor dragging Natalie out of my house. He showed the texts Trevor had sent, each one more threatening than the last. He showed photos of my injuries, medical reports, security footage of Trevor trying to break into my house. Then he called me to the stand. Walking up there felt like walking to my own execution. My legs were shaking so badly I almost tripped on the step. I sat down, put my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Gerald walked me through the events of that day, every detail, every word I could remember. I tried to stay calm, tried to keep my voice steady, but when I got to the moment Trevor hit me, my voice broke. He looked at me like I was nothing, I said, like I was just an obstacle in his way, and then he raised his hand and I couldn't finish. I just touched my cheek where the bruise had finally faded to a yellowish green. Then it was Bernard, Castor's turn to cross-examine me. He stood up slowly, adjusted his expensive suit, and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Hart," he began, his voice smooth as silk, "you're 72 years old, is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you take medication for various health conditions?" "Yes, sir." "Including medication for anxiety and depression, correct?" I felt my stomach drop. "I take medication for anxiety, yes, after my wife died." "So you have mental health issues that require medication?" "Objection," Gerald said immediately. "Relevant." "I'm establishing the witness's state of mind, Your Honor," Castor said smoothly. "I'll allow it, but make your point quickly, Mr. Castor," the judge said. Castor turned back to me. "Mr. Hart, isn't it true that you've been struggling with loneliness since your wife passed away?" "I miss my wife every day, yes." "And isn't it true that you disapproved of your daughter's marriage from the beginning?" "No, that's not true." "Really? Because we have testimony from several witnesses who say you made negative comments about Trevor at family gatherings." There were moments when I was concerned about how he treated Natalie, yes. Concerned enough to want to break them up." "Objection," Gerald was on his feet. "Counsel is testifying." "Sustained, Mr. Castor, ask questions, don't make statements." But the damage was done. Castor was painting me as a lonely, mentally unstable old man who wanted to sabotage his daughter's marriage, and it was working. I could see it in the jury's faces. He kept going, poking holes in my timeline, questioning why I hadn't called the police immediately, suggesting that my injuries could have come from a fall, implying that I'd orchestrated the whole thing for attention. By the time I stepped down from the stand, I felt like I'd been the one on trial, and maybe I had been. But then Gerald called Linda Chen. She walked to the stand with her head high, and she told her story, every brutal detail, the abuse, the manipulation, the broken collarbone, the threats that made her drop charges, and she had evidence, medical records, photos, text messages that mirrored the ones Trevor had sent me word for word. Castor tried to tear her apart too, tried to suggest she was a bitter ex-girlfriend seeking revenge, but Linda didn't break. She stayed calm. Answered every question directly, and when Castor tried to imply she was being paid to lie, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm here because Trevor Larson broke my collarbone and told me if I ever reported it, he'd kill me. I believed him then. I don't anymore. No one is paying me to tell the truth. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do." The courtroom went completely silent. One by one, the other victims testified, each one telling a similar story, each one with evidence, each one brave beyond measure. And then it was Natalie's turn. I watched my daughter walk to the stand, and my heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Trevor was staring at her with an intensity that made me want to shield her with my own body. Gerald approached her gently. "Ms. Hart, can you tell the court about your relationship with Trevor Larson?" Natalie took a deep breath. "We've been married for 4 years. We dated for a year before that. At first, everything seemed perfect. He was charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted." "When did that change?" Gradually, so gradually I didn't notice at first. He started making comments about my weight, my clothes, my friends, always disguised as concern or jokes. Then he started controlling the finances, saying he was better with money. Then he started telling me when I could see my father, what family events I could attend. Did he ever become physically violent? Natalie's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Yes. Can you describe an incident? She closed her eyes. About a year ago, we got into an argument about money. I'd bought groceries without asking him first. He said I was wasting his money. I tried to explain that we needed food, and he grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises, told me I was stupid, useless, that no one else would ever want me. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she kept going. After he hit my father, I realized something. I realized that I'd been making excuses for him, believing his lies, letting him isolate me from everyone who loved me, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't watch him hurt my father and pretend everything was okay. Do you love your father? More than anything in this world, she said, looking right at me. He's the best man I've ever known, and Trevor tried to make me believe my father was the problem. That's how twisted everything had become. Castor's cross-examination of Natalie was vicious. He implied she was lying to please me, that she was financially dependent on me, that she was having an affair and using this trial to escape her marriage. He questioned why she hadn't reported abuse earlier if it was really happening. But Natalie held firm. I didn't report it because I was terrified, she said, her voice shaking but strong, because he told me no one would believe me, because he said he'd ruin my career, destroy my reputation, make sure I lost everything. And when you're being abused, you believe those things. You believe you're trapped. But I'm not trapped anymore. When she stepped down, Trevor was visibly shaking with rage. His lawyer had to physically hold his arm to keep him in his seat. The prosecution rested. Trevor's defense was predictable. Character witnesses who said he was a good guy, a hard worker, a pillar of the community. They painted me as a bitter old man, Natalie as a confused woman being manipulated by her father, and Linda and the others as vengeful exes. Trevor himself took the stand, and he was good. He was calm, collected, sympathetic. He claimed he'd only gone to my house to have a conversation, that I'd become belligerent and aggressive, that he'd merely raised his hand to defend himself, and I'd stumbled backward and hurt myself. He said the texts were taken out of context, that he'd been frustrated but never violent. He even cried when talking about how much he loved Natalie, how this whole thing was tearing their family apart, how he just wanted to make things right. I felt sick watching him because he was convincing, and I could see some jury members nodding along. But then Gerald got to cross-examine him. Mr. Larson, you claim you never hit Mr. Hart, correct? Correct. And you claim the text messages you sent were not threatening. They were frustrated messages to a family member who was refusing to help, but not threats. I see. Can you explain then why you drove to Mr. Hart's house the day after the alleged incident and attempted to forcibly enter his property? I was concerned about him. He wasn't answering my calls. Concerned enough to try to break down his door, to attempt to enter through his windows. I was worried he might have fallen or had a medical emergency. Really, because the security footage shows you saying, and I quote, "When I finally get in there, you're going to regret this." That sounds less like concern and more like a threat, wouldn't you say? Trevor's face reddened. You're twisting my words. Am I? Let me ask you about Linda Chen. Did you have a relationship with her approximately 3 years ago? Yes. And how did that relationship end? She became unstable, started making accusations. I had to end things for my own safety. Unstable, I see. And the medical records showing she had a broken collarbone, those were just coincidental. I never touched her. She must have injured herself. Just like Mr. Hart injured himself. Objection. Castor was on his feet. Withdrawn, Gerald said smoothly. Mr. Larson, how do you explain that 3 different women in 3 different relationships with you all ended up with injuries, all claim you assaulted them, all report the exact same pattern of behavior. They're lying, all of them. They're jealous, bitter, vindictive women who, and there it was. The mask slipped. Trevor's face contorted with rage, and for just a moment, the jury saw the real him. Jealous of what? Gerald pressed. Of my success, of my relationship with Natalie, he stopped himself, but too late. No further questions, Gerald said quietly. The prosecution and defense gave their closing arguments. Castor painted a picture of a vindictive family conspiracy. Gerald laid out the facts: multiple victims, documented injuries, consistent patterns, clear evidence of assault and harassment. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of sitting in the hallway, unable to eat, unable to think, just waiting. Natalie sat beside me, her hand in mine. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? Finally, the bailiff emerged. "We have a verdict." We filed back into the courtroom. The jury entered. Trevor stood, his lawyer beside him. I could see his hands shaking. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Morrison asked. "We have, Your Honor. On the count of assault against Samuel Hart, how do you find?" "Guilty." Trevor's face went white. "On the count of criminal harassment?" "Guilty." "On the count of attempted breaking and entering?" "Guilty." "On the count of intimidation and coercion of a family member?" "Guilty." With each guilty, Trevor seemed to deflate more. By the end, he was gripping the table to keep himself upright. Judge Morrison looked at him with something like disgust. "Mr. Larson, I have reviewed all the evidence in this case. I have heard testimony from multiple victims spanning several years. What you have done is not the action of a man who lost his temper once. This is a systematic pattern of abuse, manipulation, and violence. You have preyed on vulnerable people, controlled them through fear, and shown no remorse for your actions." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I am sentencing you to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You will have no contact with Mr. Samuel Hart or his daughter Natalie Hart for the duration of your probation. You will complete anger management and battling intervention programs. You will pay restitution to Mr. Hart for medical expenses and emotional damages. And if you violate any condition of your sentence, you will serve the maximum penalty allowed by law." The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. Trevor finally broke. He collapsed against the table, his lawyer trying to hold him up, making sounds that were somewhere between sobbing and shouting. "This isn't fair, this isn't," but the bailiffs were already there, handcuffing him, leading him away. He looked back at Natalie one last time, and the look on his face was pure hatred. She didn't look away. She just stared at him until he was gone. And then it was over. People were congratulating Gerald, thanking the victims who'd testified, surrounding me with words I couldn't quite process. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. Natalie turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," I pulled her into my arms. "It's over, sweetheart. It's really over." We stood there holding each other while the courtroom emptied around us, 2 people who'd survived something that had tried to destroy us. But surviving, I was learning, was only the first step. The days after the verdict were strange, quiet in a way that felt wrong. I kept expecting something else to happen, some other shoe to drop, but it didn't. Trevor was in prison. The restraining order was permanent. Legally, it was over. But emotionally, we were just beginning to process what had happened. Natalie moved back home with me temporarily. Her apartment, the one she'd shared with Trevor, held too many bad memories. She couldn't stay there, so she moved into her old bedroom, the one with the wallpaper she'd picked out when she was 13, and we lived quietly together. Those first few weeks were hard, really hard. Natalie barely ate. She had nightmares. She'd wake up screaming, and I'd rush to her room and find her curled in a ball, trembling, saying his name over and over like a curse. "I keep thinking he's going to show up," she told me one morning over coffee. "I know he's in prison. I know he can't get to us, but I still check the locks 5 times before bed. I still look over my shoulder everywhere I go." "That's normal," I said gently. "Trauma doesn't just disappear because the person who caused it is gone." "Did you feel like this after Mom died. The question caught me off guard. Yes, I admitted. For a long time, I'd wake up and reach for her, forgetting for just a second that she was gone. And then I'd remember, and it was like losing her all over again. Does it get better? Yes, I said, slowly, not in a straight line. Some days are better than others, but yes, it gets better. She nodded, staring into her coffee cup. I loved him, you know, or I thought I did, and now I look back and I don't even know what was real. Did I ever really love him, or was I just manipulated into thinking I did? I don't know, sweetheart, but what matters is that you're here now, you're safe, and you're strong enough to heal. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't always loud, I told her. Sometimes strength is just getting up in the morning when you don't want to. It's asking for help when you need it. It's choosing to heal even when it hurts. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors. Dr. Chen, no relation to Linda or Pauline. She went twice a week and slowly, so slowly, I saw pieces of my daughter coming back. The way she laughed, the light in her eyes, the confidence in her voice. She went back to work at the hospital after a month, and her colleagues welcomed her back with open arms. No judgment, just support. It made me grateful for the people in her life who saw her as more than just a victim. I went to therapy too. My doctor recommended it after I told him I was having trouble sleeping, that I kept reliving the moment Trevor hit me, that I jumped every time the doorbell rang. You have PTSD, my therapist told me gently, from the assault and everything that followed. It's common in trauma survivors. Trauma survivor, I never thought of myself that way. I was just an old man who'd been hit by his son-in-law. But she was right. It was trauma, and it had changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt fine, strong even. Other days I couldn't get out of bed. Some days I felt proud of what I'd done, standing up to Trevor, protecting my daughter. Other days I felt like a failure for not seeing the abuse sooner, for not protecting Natalie better. You did the best you could with the information you had, my therapist said. Abusers are experts at hiding their behavior. You can't blame yourself for not seeing what he deliberately concealed. But I did blame myself. How could I not? Linda Chen reached out a few weeks after the trial. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. It was awkward at first, two people bonded by trauma, trying to figure out how to talk about anything else. How are you doing? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Some days better than others. You? The same. I thought the verdict would bring closure, but it just opened up all these old wounds. I'm back in therapy, dealing with stuff I thought I'd processed years ago. Do you regret testifying? She thought about it for a long moment. No, it was hard, but no, because for the first time since he hurt me, I feel like I have my power back. He doesn't control my story anymore. I do. I understood that. The trial had been hell, but it had also been necessary, not just for justice, but for reclaiming our own narratives. Thank you, I said, for coming forward, for being brave enough to speak up. I don't think we would have one without you. We helped each other, she said simply. That's what survivors do. 3 months after the trial, Nathan Brooks published a follow-up article, not about the case itself, but about domestic violence awareness, resources for victims, warning signs to watch for. He interviewed Natalie and me, with our permission, about our experience with the legal system and the healing process. The response was overwhelming. We got letters from people across the state sharing their own stories, thanking us for speaking out. Some were survivors, some were family members who'd missed the signs, some were people who were currently in abusive situations, asking for help. Natalie and I started speaking at domestic violence awareness events, just telling our story, answering questions, being visible proof that you can survive, that you can heal, that you can move forward. It was terrifying at first, but it was also cathartic. Turning our pain into something that might help someone else gave it meaning. 6 months after the trial, Natalie moved into her own apartment, a new one in a different part of town. She decorated it herself, picking out furniture and paint colors and plants, making it her own space, her safe space. "This is mine," she said when she showed it to me, and there was pride in her voice. "Just mine. No one else has a key. No one else gets to tell me what to do here." I hugged her tight. "I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Dad. You saved my life." "No," I said firmly. "You saved your own life. I just helped." She smiled, and it was real. The first genuinely happy smile I'd seen from her in years. As for me, life settled into a new normal. I stayed in my house, surrounded by memories of my wife and my daughter's childhood. I kept up with my routines, gardening, organizing photos, coffee with friends from church. But I was different now, more aware, more cautious, more willing to speak up when something felt wrong. Pauline Chen and I became closer friends. She'd bring over dinner once a week, and we'd sit on my porch and talk about everything and nothing. She understood, in a way many people didn't, what I'd been through. She'd witnessed it. She'd been part of it. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked me one evening. All the chaos and pain of the trial, I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I finally said. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than losing Linda, my wife, harder than anything. But it was necessary, because if I hadn't stood up, he would have kept hurting people, and I would have had to live with that knowledge." "You're a good man, Samuel Hart." "I'm just a man who did what needed to be done," I said, "nothing more." But maybe that was enough. A year after the verdict, I received a letter from the prison, from Trevor. My hands shook as I held it, debating whether to open it or throw it away unopened. I opened it. The letter was filled with apologies, claims that he'd been in therapy, that he understood now what he'd done, that he was deeply sorry. He asked for forgiveness. He asked if we could reconcile when he got out. I read it twice, trying to feel something, anger, sympathy, anything, but all I felt was empty. I showed it to my therapist. "What do you want to do with this?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to believe he's changed. Part of me knows that's exactly what he wants me to think." "You don't owe him forgiveness, Samuel. Forgiveness isn't something you give to make the other person feel better. It's something you do for yourself, if and when you're ready." Am I ready? Are you? I thought about everything Trevor had done, the manipulation, the violence, the pain he'd caused not just to me, but to Natalie, to Linda, to all his victims, the years of trauma we were all still working through. "No," I said, "I'm not ready, and maybe I never will be." I wrote him back, a short letter. "Trevor, I received your letter. I acknowledge that you're seeking forgiveness, but I am not able to give that to you at this time, and I may never be. What you did caused immense harm to multiple people, harm we're still healing from. I hope you are genuinely working on yourself for your own sake, but I cannot be part of that journey. Please do not contact me or my daughter again. Samuel Hart." I sent it and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't owe him anything, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even a response, really, but I gave him that much and no more. 2 years after the trial, Natalie met someone new, a kind man named Philip who worked as a teacher. She was terrified to tell me about him. "I don't know if I can trust my own judgment anymore," she confessed. "What if I'm making the same mistake again?" "You're not the same person you were when you met Trevor," I told her. "You're wiser now, stronger. You know the warning signs. Trust yourself." She introduced me to Philip a few weeks later. I watched him carefully, looking for red flags, but he was patient with Natalie, respectful, kind. When she got anxious about something small, he didn't dismiss her feelings or get angry. He just held her hand and listened. "He's good," I told her after he left. "Really good." "I think so too," she said, and she was smiling. "I'm taking it slow, really slow, but Dad, I think I might actually be happy." That's all I'd ever wanted for her. Happiness, safety, love that didn't hurt. The years passed. Trevor served his time and was released on probation. We heard through the grapevine that he'd moved to another state, started over somewhere new. Part of me worried he'd find new victims. Part of me hoped he'd actually changed. But mostly, I just didn't think about him anymore. He'd taken enough of our time, enough of our peace. I wasn't going to give him any more. Natalie and Philip got engaged, then married. I walked her down the aisle, and this time I wasn't worried. This time I saw the way he looked at her with genuine love and respect. This time I knew she was truly choosing happiness. On her wedding day, she pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for standing up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself, for never giving up on me, for showing me what real love looks like." "I'm your father," I said. "That's what fathers do." "No," she said firmly. "Not all fathers would have done what you did. Some would have looked the other way. Some would have chosen peace over justice. But you chose me. You chose to fight for me even when I was fighting against you. That's something I'll never forget." We stood there in that quiet moment, father and daughter, survivors of something that had tried to break us. But we were still here, still standing, still fighting for the good in the world. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that happened, I ask myself, was it worth it? The trial, the pain, the trauma, the public scrutiny, the hate mail, the sleepless nights, the fear, was it all worth it? And I have to say yes, because Trevor can't hurt anyone else now, because Natalie is free and happy, because Linda and the other victims got to see justice served, because maybe, just maybe, our story helped someone else recognize abuse and get out before it was too late. Justice was painful. God, it was painful. It cost me peace of mind, sleep, my sense of safety in my own home. It strained relationships. It exposed wounds I didn't know I had, but it was necessary. Because I didn't destroy Trevor, let me be clear about that. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. His choices, his actions, his violence, that's what led to his downfall. All I did was refuse to be silent about it. All I did was stand up and say, "This is wrong, and I won't let you get away with it." Sometimes the right thing costs you everything, but doing nothing would have cost more. I'm 74 now. My face has long since healed from that slap, but I can still feel it sometimes, like a ghost pain. A reminder, I'm slower than I used to be, more cautious. I lock my doors carefully. I check my security cameras. I'm more aware of people's behavior, more willing to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. But I'm also more at peace, because I know I did the right thing, because my daughter is safe and happy, because I can look at myself in the mirror and know I stood up when it mattered most. That package I gave Trevor the day after he hit me, the one he thought contained money, the one that made him nearly pass out when he opened it, it was legal papers. A restraining order, criminal charges, police reports, everything documented, everything official, everything that would bring his world crashing down. He opened it on my porch while police cruisers were pulling up. He opened it and saw his entire future disappearing in black and white legal text. And yes, he nearly collapsed, from rage, from fear, from the sudden, terrible realization that he'd finally gone too far. That moment was the beginning of the end for him, and the beginning of healing for us. If you've been moved by this story, if you've seen yourself or someone you love in these words, please understand this. Abuse thrives in silence. It grows in the dark. But when we speak up, when we stand together, when we refuse to let it continue, we take away its power. You are not alone. Whether you're the victim or the person trying to help the victim, you are not alone. There are resources. There are people who will believe you. There is a way out. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But you are stronger than you know, and you deserve safety. You deserve peace. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. Before I go, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Share your thoughts. Share your story if you feel safe doing so. Sometimes knowing that someone else understands can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring. And if you're currently in a situation like I was, like Natalie was, please reach out. Talk to someone, document everything, and know that it's not your fault. None of it is your fault. My name is Samuel Hart. I'm 74 years old, and I'm a survivor. And so can you be.